Hey there. Welcome to the John Huff Podcast. Is this your first visit? Are you new around here? If so, I want to say you are most welcome. Thank you so much for dropping by, and you have chosen an excellent time to check in because today on the program, ladies and gentlemen, we have no less than the great Jabo Bihlman himself. Now, Jabo is best known to this audience as the guitar player and a contributing songwriter to the great, powerful, heavy blues rock band Grinder Blues, okay? And Jabo plays in that band with his brother Scot Little Bihlman on drums and, of course, the great Doug Pinnick on bass guitar and most of the lead vocals. They are fabulous. If you have not been listening to them, despite all the time I've spent talking about them, you should be, man. You should be listening to the Grinder Blues. And this is just a great and really fun conversation with a cat who has had a really interesting and successful career, all right? Jabo and I get to talking about road stories. We get to talking about music. We get to talking about the music business, the music industry, and of course, all things Grinder Blues. This is a really terrific chat, and I am so grateful and stoked to have Jabo on the show today. All right. Just before we get to that, I will remind you that the show can be followed on your socials. John Huff Podcast on Instagram, John Huff Podcast on the Facebook device, John Huff Podcast on the TikTok. And hey, if you really like what you hear today, Patreon.com/John Huff Podcast. I'm not going to labor or extend this introduction any further. Very excited to present the great Jabo Bihlman, and we'll get to it on the other side. Hello, you're listening to the John Huff Podcast. Oh, yay. All right, Jabo Bihlman, we're in.
Cool.
Jabo, the voice of Q100 Radio.
Yeah, indeed.
When did you become a radio man?
Yeah, man, it's been about, I think it's been about almost 4 years now. And it's a great gig for me, man. I'm having fun doing it. The station is very free and lets me do kind of what I want and play what I want. So that's fun. You know, it's not a corporate station. So, yeah, man, our catalog is all over the place and I get to play a lot of new stuff and break new bands and play the kind of music that I like. So, yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. It's pretty fun.
That's great because
yeah,
in the glory days of radio, you know, DJs could actually be personalities.
It's the last DJ, man. You know, the Tom Petty song. I mean, I'm living that.
Right.
So I'm pretty lucky. But yeah, you're right. I remember back in the day, there was, there was a guy on, I'm from the Chicago area. So there's a guy on WLS that I used to listen to all the time. And, The Loop and these DJs, I can't even think of any of their names now, but they were personalities that we all knew, you know?
The Loop,
man.
I did an episode, stop me if you know, but I did an episode about the Disco Sucks thing.
Yeah, with Steve Dahl. That's who that was.
Steve Dahl, Disco Demolition Night. That was The Loop, right?
Yeah, that was The Loop.
Were you around in those? Like, that was late 70s.
Yeah, I mean, I remember it all. I mean, I was a pretty young kid, but the Disco Sucks thing, that was big in Chicago. I mean, that was huge.
It was like the epicenter, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, they did it was at Soldier Field. They did a big thing at Soldier Field with that.
They did
the whole Disco Sucks thing. It turned into like a riot. It was crazy.
There was a riot at the baseball stadium. Would have been.
Oh, is that what it was? Maybe it was Comiskey Park or something.
It was Comiskey, yeah.
It was Comiskey, yeah.
Steve Dahl came out with a whole
riot.
The idea was you bring a disco record, and then in the 7th inning stretch, they're going to blow them up at center field.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes, it's all coming back to me now.
Which they did, but they blew up the whole center field. It was like a mine crater out there.
What? Really? DJs did that? That's
amazing,
funny.
Right? And they somehow, like 45,000 people got into the game, and they only had security for half of that.
Oh, my God.
People stormed the field, and it was chaos.
Yeah, well,
that's your people in Chicago.
I would say that was a marked success.
Well, they left a mark on the field, that's for sure.
Yeah, indeed.
How did you find what's the Traverse City connection? That's where you're based now.
Yeah, that's my my brother and I moved out to Los Angeles in 89, I think, something like that. And when that happened, my parents moved up here.
Okay.
Because we used to come up here as kids, you know, fudgies and all that. So
right.
It just and so whenever we would come back from LA, this is where we would come. And so one thing, you know, it just sort of becomes your home base then after a while. And
I see. As
I've moved all over the country, I tend to wind up back here now and then. This is my second stint. So
really,
yeah, it's short of the isolation, which is significant. It is a pretty good place, you know.
Well, I've been there once, and that was to see Grinder Blues play.
Oh, right on, bro.
Yeah, I'm a few hours due east of you in Canada.
Yeah, right.
And so when we saw, I did not expect to get the chance to see Grinder Blues play live. And wow, we saw that you were coming. And it turned out the night before at the same venue, Jackal was playing.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So we made a weekend out of it. And
that's awesome.
It was great. And both shows were fabulous. But getting to see Grinder Blues play was such a treat, man.
Oh, thank you, dude. I appreciate that, man. Yeah, that was a fun show, fun night.
Oh, it was really great. And I have some really weird Grinder Blues connections, but one of the great moments in my life was when the first Grinder Blues album came out. At the time, I was running a music blog, and I interviewed Doug for it. And Doug actually sent me the Grinder Blues record via email before it was released.
Wow, that's cool.
And just for me, getting an email from Doug Pinnick is a big deal.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
me too.
I mean, King's X has been my favorite band forever. So
yeah, man.
Amazing. So here I am, thrilled to be getting an email from Doug. What's it like all of a sudden being in a band with, I don't want to make this about Doug, but.
Well, no, but it is. I mean, you know, I also am a lifelong King's X fan. And I think Doug Pinnick is the greatest singer in rock history, in my opinion. For whatever reason, you know, I just love it. And huge King's X fan, huge Ty Tabor fan. It's a shame that King's X wasn't bigger than they were. They're actually having a bit of a resurgence right now, which makes it hard to tour with Grinder Blues. But so that's good. And that's largely because Doug has been so busy over the past decade or so, really doing other projects, Grinder Blues, of course, you know, KXM, he's done some other stuff, the Hendrix tours and stuff. So yeah, Doug has been super busy. And that's great. That's been good for King's X. So I was living in Las Vegas at the time, and we're buddies. My brother and I are buddies with Ray Luzier from Korn. He's a drummer from Korn. We all went to MI together.
Really?
Yeah. And so he was in LA at the time, and he happened to go to a party that Ray was having, and Doug was there. And so he got talking to Doug a little bit, you know, mostly, I think it was about like production music, like sync music, because we've had a lot of luck with that and done a lot of cool stuff with sync, like Sons of Anarchy and stuff. And, you know, so Doug was very interested in that. And he's like, well, you know, man, my bro's in Vegas. Why don't you come if you're into it, man, let's come to Vegas and we'll start writing some songs specifically for sync.
Right.
And I was like, what? Doug Pinnick is coming to my house to write music for sync. I mean, I was just as freaked as you know.
Amazing.
Because this is my own personal Elvis. You know what I mean? I mean, in that context, I think that someone who thought Elvis was a giant star, you know, everybody to then all of a sudden be in a band with him would have been something. And I always equate it to that, so, but very quickly, Doug put us all at ease and it was not a problem. And once you get to know Doug, the stars, he's just a guy, just like everybody is, I mean, it doesn't matter how high they are up in this business. Everybody puts their pants on the same way. You know what I mean? It's just people. And in fact, I've come to the conclusion, the higher up you move in the business, the nicer people are.
Really?
To be honest with you. Yeah.
Interesting.
But so we started writing some music for Sync. And in fact, the first song we wrote was a song that I already sort of had in mind for Sync. It was a funky thing that actually wound up on the El Dos record. It's Gotta Get Me Some of That.
Oh, what a tune that is.
And so that just turned into this long jam that we did not put on the first record because we didn't have lyrics or anything for it. But we already had that song and we would play it all the time just to warm up and jam a little bit and this and that. So we started writing songs, and pretty quick, as soon as we started writing songs, it really started to take the direction of more of a band thing than production music, because production music is extremely specific and you're generally writing with an idea in mind, trying to figure that out. So these songs were just sort of organically taken off a lot more like, band music. And one thing led to another, because I'll never forget, I said, man, we should do a blues thing, but I want to do like 7-string blues. Those words came out of my mouth, 7-string blues. And Doug was like, oh my God, yes, dude, that is exactly what I'm talking about. So that's actually what happened is I had a 7-string, or actually Doug got me a 7-string from Schecter because we wanted to try this. Well, I have this super bad tendonitis. And that 7-string neck is just so wide. So I played it for like 2 days in a rehearsal, kind of working some of this stuff up. And I was like, damn, dude, this thing is killing me. I can't do it. So we decided to just forget the 7-string thing, but tune down.
Right.
So Grinder Blues is totally tuned down to C. Everything we do is always in C, which gives it that gigantic, huge bottom end sound that has come to be the signature sound of Grinder Blues. I don't think there might be one. Actually, I think there's a tune or two that's like drop D. For the most part, it's almost always C, and I'm sure that all of El Dos is in C. So
it's so heavy, and seeing it live, because I mean, Doug's tone is so great. And it's just live, it's huge, right? And his voice is, especially at this point in Doug's life where his voice has gotten quite a lot lower and deeper, it's perfect. And it works so well. Like, he is a blues man, in some ways, in his soul, I think.
That's what I told him. I mean, I've always thought that Doug was a blues gospel singer, all the King's X stuff and all the harmonies that they did. His phrasing has always been very bluesy, but if you know his history, he came up in, I guess that his family's kind of from Mississippi, because when we were down there recording the El Dos record, that's where we recorded it, down in the Delta. And we visited all these places, and Doug's telling us all this history about his family being from down there. I'm like, what, dude? I thought we were all from Chicago. What, you know what I mean? It's because he apparently kind of grew up in Joliet.
Right.
So it was just this really weird kind of confluence at the time. And it just fell into place very easily. It was pretty cool, man. And yes, I mean, obviously it was a huge thing for me to be working with Doug and, getting to know him as a friend and stuff. It's been pretty cool.
I've spoken to him several times, but just as a fan in the line, apart from that interview, I got to spend an hour on the phone with him, which was just wild. But
yeah,
what an interesting life,
He'll be like that if you open up the mic. Doug just starts talking.
I noticed. It's very easy as an interviewer. It's so easy. It's like ask a question, and he'll talk, and it'll all be interesting because what a life that guy's had, right?
Boy, no kidding. That is the truth. Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm listening to the Grinder Blues records in prep for this, revisiting them,
Yeah.
And I had forgotten just how fun they are.
Oh, that's cool.
Like it's heavy blues, whatever, but those songs are, and I can tell listening to them how much fun you guys had recording them, writing them. There's just a really great energy about them. Talk to me about this writing process. I know Doug likes to kind of work quick these days on some of this stuff. How did all of this go? I know that's a huge question, but
no, it's cool. It's so the first record was songs when we went in, they were songs that we had pretty much hashed out, a lot of them anyway, because we had been working on this stuff and this and that. And generally what would happen is we would come up with some sort of a riff. I'd come up with a riff and we just sort of build on it, just like any songwriting process with the band. And then we would knock lyrics around and Doug would say one lyric and I would say another one, and then we'd sort of put them together that way. And so it all came together pretty easy. The other thing too, is that you may have noticed that these lyrics to a lot of the Grinder Blues songs ain't bleeding on the page, like Doug is used to doing with King's X,
Right.
He wanted it to be, he wanted it to be blues type, ideology, I guess, for lack of a better term. And he wanted the and we talked about this too, he's like, I'm not going to do it if we're going to be bleeding on the page and, it's going to be these super deep lyrics. He's like, we should just do like 50s, 60s blues where it's just about trains and mamas and, all that kind of stuff. We're like, yeah, man, that sounds great. So
don't come home.
Yeah, don't go home. Right. So it kind of came, but that's an interesting song too, because he based those lyrics on Just Come Home, which was, I think, a Muddy Waters, right?
Yeah.
Or who was it? One of those.
One of the
so
classics.
It was kind of an answer to that. So the first record came together kind of like that. We recorded that then at the Palm Studio in Vegas, and then part of it we recorded in my house. Actually, nice. I think a lot of the vocals we did it at my house because I had this huge room in the front room, and it was really good with the reverb in there.
Cool.
And then El Dos was a completely different thing. It was like 5 years later. We had done a couple of tours. We didn't do too much, in between times because Doug was very busy and we were all doing other stuff. So when we decided we were going to do the second record, our producer, Miles Fullwider, he was actually down in Mississippi, which is how we wound up down there. So we went down there with him with no songs at all. And we had like 5 days to cut this record.
Amazing.
So we get down there. I mean, I had some a few riff ideas, but we were not ready to go into the studio, and that ain't how I roll at all.
Really?
We've always, everything I've ever done has always been very much prepared before we go into the studio. Cause that's time and money. You know what I mean? It's like, if you don't want to be the old days of just, renting, Cherokee studios for a month is just not, it's not the way it works anymore. So, you want to be as prepared as you can. And that's usually the way it works. So anyway, we get down there and didn't have too much. I had these riffs and we just started building those songs. We would write those songs in the morning or the previous night and record them the next day or in the afternoon. And they're pretty much, all the rhythm tracks are just pretty much first couple takes, run through it, put it down. The vocals we laid down later, because we didn't have lyrics or anything. It was just like building them as we had I think he and I sang more on the El Dos record. Mm-hmm. So we had a chance to kind of go out after and work on that vocals and lyrics, and we'd run them past each other, but it was very much a remote process after that. It was, we were all in the same room to cut all the rhythm tracks. And I think I did a couple of leads maybe, but then we pretty much had to go our separate ways, and Doug was writing and he laid down vocals in LA. I laid down vocals here. And then it was so from that point, and then I went down to and mixed the record with Miles down in Fort Wayne, which is where he lives now. So it was this long process. I mean, that was a couple of years before that El Dos record was actually done. And again, that's another thing that we're not used to. It's usually you cut a record within a month, it's out. Right. Or it's at least it's done and ready to go. I mean, it depends on these days, the label. So, and then, the second record too has been put out by Metalville, which is a much better label for us than Megaforce ever was.
Really?
I don't think the first record got its due. But Metalville's been really good and they did a good job putting it out. So we're pretty happy there. So anyway, back to the writing process. It was, it's pretty easy and nobody really tells anybody sort of what to do. We just sort of start playing and you get these ideas, and then the writing process builds itself up from there. But the second record was that was a fly by the seat of our pants kind of thing. It was pretty wild.
Well, that's interesting because I'm listening to the second record and there's actually rhythmically some tricky stuff going on there. I'm trying to remember what I wrote down here. Hold Me Close. I've got verses I'm counting in 5.
Yeah.
And got to get me some of that. I got sections I'm counting in 9.
Yeah, it's very possible.
It's a prog record.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, that's another kind of thing that I dig about Grinder Blues is that happens organically as well. And part of this is because my brother will lay down some sort of a groove and we'll all start playing over it with some sort of a riff. And then Doug generally is looking at it differently than we are. I mean, Scott and I have been playing together our whole lives, right?
Sure.
You know, Doug comes in and so he may be looking at the rhythm a little bit different than I am. And so he'll start singing these parts. And I'm like, that is not at all what I was thinking, you know, but we just keep playing and let it go. And before you know it, the parts do wind up stretching into longer measures, longer sections, and different lyric content and meter than I ever thought that it would be, which is so great, you know, it's because, you know, then that kind of avoids the standard blues tropes and stuff like that, or, you know, and that's kind of what we always say with Grinder Blues. It's blues with a twist.
It is that. It is that. I mean, just the tuning alone, right?
Right.
I'm trying to imagine, and I mean, I got to see it with my own eyes, but, well, actually, when I saw you guys, El Dos wasn't out yet, so I don't know if you had any of those songs yet, but I'm imagining, Doug, it's one thing to lay down, you know, the beds or whatever, and that's fine, and then vocals separately, but to do the two together in some of those cases, like I'm trying to get my head around singing over some of those time signatures, and he plays so many notes on the bass, you know, it's like, I suppose by now it's second nature to him, but it's just like, objectively, it's like, wow, for all of you guys, like holding that stuff together, especially if you wrote the song that morning and recorded it that after, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, wow.
That's half the reason why we got to hold it together sometimes. Well, Doug, I will say this, and this has been great for me. It's been a real honor, really, more as Doug depends on me a lot to hold it down as far as he looks at and I'm sure he does the same thing with Ty and everybody that he works with. He's singing and he's playing his bass line and he can separate the two. And then the guitar really is the bulk of the changes and the sounds that are happening with different voicings of, you know, chords and stuff. And so he will allow me as a guitarist the freedom to do what I'm going to do. He's not overly concerned about what's happening as long as it sounds good and as long as it's working with the vocal.
Right.
But he builds the vocal around it. So it's just this great, you know, sort of arrangement where he just lets me do whatever I want to do, and he sings over it, and his bass line falls into it. It's a pretty organic thing, and it's really cool. But like I say, I mean, it's really cool for me because he pretty much just starts the car and says, "Let's go, man," and off we go. You know, there's not a lot of discussion about who's going to do what. You know,
is it cool for you to just be the guitar player? I know with the Bihlman brothers, you did most of the singing, and of course your own solo stuff. What's it like just being the guitar player mostly in this band?
You know, it's funny because I've almost always only been in 3-piece bands.
Okay.
You know, we're big fans of the 3-piece band. I mean, every night we used to have a percussion player that we used with the Bihlmans, but for the most part, it was pretty much, you know, the power trio kind of a thing. So it is a bit strange when I'm only just playing and not doing any singing. And like, you know, like you said, with the El Dos, I'm doing more singing on that one. Mm-hmm. But it's usually just harmonies. So it's pretty fun. You know, I can just sort of sit back instead of like with Bihlman stuff or with my own stuff, I'm playing somewhat intricate guitar parts sometimes and singing. And so you just get good at that and you just get used to it. But with Grinder, I could just sort of sit back and like listen to Doug and watch the crowd and just play and, oh, it's a lead. Here we go. You know, what's this harmony though? I got to get, you know, so it's pretty cool. It's definitely a different vibe, you know?
Yeah, it seems it, but it's just, well, it's like I said, they're just so fun. You know, I missed that a little bit when El Dos came out. Hey, you're in a pandemic when that record comes out. I mean, did that affect what you did with the record at that point? touring wise, anything like that?
Oh, well, yeah, touring wise, without a doubt. I mean, there was everything was shut. We in fact had dates. I had dates, Jabo dates in England, in the UK, right that spring that the pandemic hit. And so those all went away. And we did do one, trying to think back now. We did a European tour, Grinder tour before the pandemic. So yeah, we've never had a chance to tour El Dos at all. Right. And it's a bit of a drag, but this business has changed a lot since I got in it. And it's not really the kind of situation where it's like, hey, let's just go do a tour. It requires a lot more these days, and venues expect a lot more support from the artist and the labels and stuff than they used to, and what I mean by that is, well, I shouldn't say we didn't do anything, because we did do that West Coast swing not too long ago with Grinder. It was about a year ago. Not that quite long ago. We played the Whiskey in some great clubs out in LA. Man.
What's it like playing the Whiskey?
It reminds me of the old days. We used to play there all the time when we lived in LA.
Yeah, well, I guess you would.
But it has changed. It has changed drastically. And yeah, I mean, it's especially playing there with Doug. And I mean, the Whiskey's kind of turned in now. I mean, that was, in the 80s, early 90s. The Whiskey's now turned into this like legacy venue, that, I mean, some bands, the Stones might come through and just hop on stage. I mean, it's just crazy, right? So, now it is just such a different kind of thing. But they were really on us as a band and the label to promote the hell out of that, and, really? And all over the socials, and of course, doing all this stuff, and which is completely fine if you've got a team of people that are doing that for you. But if you don't, that's kind of on the band to do it. And we're not social media experts to say anything. You've probably noticed. But so it gets to be hard.
It's frustrating for any creative these days who can't just focus on writing their music or making their films or doing their art or whatever. It's like you've got suddenly this obligation to be a social media content creator as well.
Yeah.
Which I find frustrating even as a podcaster.
I'm sure you do. I mean, look, everybody does. My kids are on me my daughters are on me to do these videos on TikTok.
Right, exactly.
Which I think is a great idea, and I'm down, but it's like I have to motivate myself to do that, and to then not only that, but understand how to do it. Now, thankfully, my daughter is actually the social media coordinator for the Chicago Wolves, so she knows a lot about this.
That's not so bad, man. Yeah.
Yeah, she knows a lot about this, so she's going to help me do it. But I mean, again, this is something that 25, even 20 years ago did not exist.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I used to play GHS strings. I don't play GHS anymore, but the reason why is because when my contract was coming back up with those guys after a 20-year relationship, I had a new front man there. Or a point man and new guy. And he was like, well, how many followers do you have on Instagram? I'm like, Instagram? What the hell are you talking about? He's like, well, it's all changed now. And you got to have 8,000 or something like that followers on Instagram. And I was like, well, dude, if that's the case, then I'm bye-bye. And, it's just, I mean, that's just the way people think now. So thankfully I'm with DR now and they're much cooler, but
yeah, right.
It's just a much different world now, and it's really hard without a team, and even if there's only a couple of people that can help you with social media and help you with the whole it's pretty rough, because you're right. I mean, you're on tour, you're trying to do all this stuff, as well as make sure you're making your posts, so yeah. Actually, the funny thing about it is Doug is really good at that.
Yeah, I see him pop up a lot. Yeah. Yep.
He is really good at the social media, and so which is ironic because he is not the savviest computer dude you ever met in your life, as far as like, I don't think he could draft a letter. Let's put it that way, just because he don't do that. Yeah. Don't draft no letters, but he can sure as hell make some cool, Facebook / Instagram posts and stuff. And so, yeah, it's just a much different world now. It's really challenging in some ways, and in some other ways it's cooler. So we just all deal with it.
Well, I mean, touring wise, quite apart from all that, there's this, I mean, it's so expensive now, right? Like when you
Sure
go with
is.
Grinder Blues, I mean, are you guys, 'cause I know King's X does like a lot of fly-ins or they'll do a weekend or whatever. Do you
Right.
guys do that? Or do you like, we're out for a month and we're out for a month with a bus
No.
or whatever?
No, it really is more like fly-in type stuff these days. Or generally, what happens with all my projects now actually is that you fly to one location and you do 5 or 6 dates in a week
Right.
to 10 days in that area, and you fly out. I mean, the days of 6-week tours are gone for me anyway, only because you're right. That is an expensive proposition. I mean, I don't think that most people who are just fans of music really understand how expensive it is to tour, and partially it's almost all travel. You know, I mean, you're talking gas, you're talking rental of a vehicle. Back in the day, you know, we had a thing that we toured in, but these days, since you're not on the road all the time, it doesn't make sense to say, "Oh, we're going to spend $100,000 on a decent whatever to drive around in and pull a trailer, and you got to hire a driver, and now you've got a tour manager, and all of these things cost a lot of money." So, you know, your 1%ers at Universal, you know, can do that, but everybody else that's somehow like us, kind of scratched our way to the middle. You know, it's just a much different thing, and you need more money from the venues, and it's all about how many social media followers do you have. You know, so I mean, it's pretty crazy, dude. It's So and you know, the fly-in dates and stuff like that are cool, but they also offer their own challenges as far as equipment, really, because now you're talking backline, right?
Exactly,
you either need backline there, or, I mean, I've pared my pedal board down to the point where it is just bare bones now. Grinder Blues is a little bit easier because, with the exception of a significant phaser presence in that band, there ain't a lot of effects. You know, I mean, it's pretty much a wah pedal, a phaser, and I do some delay stuff, but not much. So I've been able to pare my board down pretty good, and it's a carry on. I can carry that board on, and if they've got an industry standard amp, I'm good to go generally. You know.
What's it like for Scott though? Because I mean, he's not carrying drums with him, presumably.
It's got to have backline. It's, you know, but you know, here's the other thing too: is that most A level clubs, even B level clubs, they've got backline, or they can get it, and so it just is part of the thing. Drum kits, you know, like I say, the Whiskey, that last tour we did, all those venues were good venues. They had no problem. They have house kits. It was not a big deal. But if you're talking about fill-in dates, right, or routing dates, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, you know, now you're playing smaller venues on the outskirts, blah, 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 or whatever, to get from one town to the next. This is a problem. And this is the reason why people, usually what would happen these days is the opening act would allow us to use their stuff. That happened in Europe a lot.
Did it?
Yeah, so whatever opening band was there, they were like, yeah, just use this kit, no problem.
Oh, that's nice.
And everybody's cool, you know, so it works out pretty good. Yeah, I mean, everybody is kind of understands where the business is these days, and if you're not, and then I go and see Korn. Ray Lucy, man, that dude hit the jackpot with Korn. I mean, they're touring. They're right. It's like 1986 in the world of Korn. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they've all got their own tour buses. You know, they've got checks from here to Christmas. They've got a management team. I mean, it is insane, dude. So
to be fair, if anybody's worth that, Ray is.
Totally agree, man. Totally agree. Not only is he going to go down as one of the greatest rock drummers in history, in my opinion, he's also a super sweetheart dude.
I've heard that about him.
You gotta love that. Yeah, he's a great guy.
Absolute beast, though. Man,
Monster.
I am myself a drummer and have done a bit of touring, and
so you know, yeah,
I know it at the very indie level, and.
So you were always dealing with your own kid and all that kind of stuff usually, right?
Well, a lot of the time, but I mean, I've been lucky enough to do some touring in Europe where I'm not taking my drums on a plane.
Of course, right.
We've always rented backline though, so we carried it with us. We had a van. We did the thing. But you know, I've wandered into clubs, and we're playing like early on little bitty clubs, eventually some theaters, but It's like some of the stuff you wander into, it's like, okay, I'm glad I got drums with me. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
But
That's the truth.
one of my favorite stories is I've been in Europe with a Canadian artist called Sarah Smith, and she's done really, really well as an indie artist, and she has an audience, and it's been really, really great.
Cool, man. That's great. Good for you. That's a good gig.
It was.
was a good gig.
When it was happening, it was great.
Well, they come and go, man.
That's life as a side player.
That's right.
We get to Dusseldorf, Germany, this great little jazz club, tiny, tiny little place called Emputska. Really beautiful little room. Tiny. It holds maybe 30 people, you know?
Yeah, right.
And they build a stage by putting plywood on top of a booth, a seating booth, and then you sort of climb up on it, right?
That's
like,
so cool.
And so the owner of the place,
been there, man.
Oh, I know. And it makes great stories, and it was a great night. Anyways, speaking of backline, the owner of the club says, "Hey, I've got some drums here if you want to use them." And I'm like, "Hey, whatever has me not carrying my stuff off the band, that's right fabulous." It's like, well, I'll go have a look. But, you know, in the back of your mind, it's like, house kit. Okay.
Yeah.
So he takes me downstairs and he points to the corner and there's this absolutely gorgeous champagne sparkle little Gretsch jazz kit.
Oh, nice. Cool.
And I'm like, oh, wow. And he says, you know, I've got cymbals too. You know, opens up the bag, this gorgeous set of Turkish Istanbul, the most beautiful cymbals I've ever played in my life.
Wow.
We set this up on the plywood and 20 people sat around and we played this gig. It was like, man, sometimes the backline turns into the greatest story you ever had, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was beautiful. And those moments on the road, you know, are just what keeps you going, kind of, you know?
Man, dude, I got two funny stories about drums. Once we were playing with Sun Seals in Italy. And this was actually a pretty big gig. It was on a military base and there was like 5,000 people. There was this huge gig.
Nice.
And the drum riser, was behind us. And my brother, was kind of like the way that worked back in those days is the Bihlman brothers would open for Sun and then Sun would basically just join us on stage and then it would become the Sun Seals show, you know? So my bro is back there playing the drums. All of a sudden, this is during the Bihlman set. All of a sudden I hear this like cacophony of craziness and the drum kit fell right off the front of the stage. And there was like, when he was getting set up, they had like screws in the floor, Tom. I mean, it was like, what in God's name? Oh my God, dude, it was crazy. So yeah, off the drums come from the front of the thing because they didn't have them, secured to the stage.
Oh, wow.
That was one time. And another time we played a Club of Bihlman show in Austria. I can't remember what the place was, but again, routing gig, Tuesday, Wednesday, something like that.
Sure.
And it was just like that, dude. It was that place was about the size. I mean, I don't know how big it was, but it was very small. By the time we got done or, into the set, the people were standing right in front of the stage. It was like a foot off the ground. And it was just, there was probably 50 people in a 25 seat venue. You know what I mean? And it was just, it was almost claustrophobic. I mean, I could like barely move, man. It was insane,
Mm-hmm.
But they were so nice and so just like into it, man. And it was just this really weird sort of, a communal vibe that was going on in there. That was it was a great experience. It sticks out as one of the great gigs in my memory because it was just so strange. It was like people were standing literally like a foot from my face.
Yeah,
and we couldn't really move very much.
Yeah, I've played that.
I was going to smack somebody with a guitar head. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, it was the same kind of deal, man. And you know what? Here's the interesting thing too about Europe, not to go on too much about it. And you already know this because you've played these kind of venues. It doesn't matter to those people.
No,
they don't care where the hell they're seeing you or what the venue is or whatever. They're just into the music. And that is really the cool thing I love about going over there is those people are music fans. They really are. It's not about how cool you look or how big of a bus you showed up in or hell, half the time, whether or not they've even heard of you.
Most of the times they haven't in our case.
Yeah. And so well, it's still packed, right? I mean, people still come out to see it because they love music. And that's, I think we've lost that a lot in the US.
I think it's the same here. I mean, I've had many times where we've been setting up a show like setting up for a show, loading in, sound checking, whatever. The room is empty. And you sit back and you think, nobody's coming to this.
I know.
Like, who on earth is coming to this? They've never heard of us. There's just no way. And then a couple hours later, you go on and the place is just packed out.
Yeah, that's nice.
But it happens
it's because of the venue, though, right?
It helps,
if you're playing the good venue or whatever the hot venue is in town, man, you're almost set. But whether they've heard of you or not, and that when you associate yourself with good venues, you raise the level of awareness for the band, but you also raise the credibility level of the band. Playing every dive from here to is not, necessarily the best course of action. But again, getting into the good venues and blah, blah, blah. It's just all it's a very complex these days compared to the way it used to be.
Oh, it can be. But it's just this weird idiosyncrasy of Europe that the rooms are full somehow.
Yeah, I have to agree, man.
It's a cultural thing. Like there's still like a go out and do stuff culture over there, which you're right. In Canada, it's kind of the same. It's like pulling teeth to get anybody to come out. And if you're playing outside of something different for Grinder Blues. You guys have a name and a thing. I'm indie, right? So I show up in your town. You've really never heard of us.
Right.
Getting people to come out, it's really like pulling teeth, which is why you try to play with a local band and whatever. But
of course. Well, the other thing too is there's so much competition now, right?
Oh,
Back in the old days, people didn't stay at home and watch Netflix, or a live concert on TV, or hell, even a live streamed show. Maybe it's your show that's being streamed. It's like, it is just such and it's a real problem for venues.
Sure.
Because now venues are like, well, we got this to deal with.
Yeah.
Where before it was hard enough to get people to come 20 years ago. Now we've got people not going out because they've got every possible distraction in their home.
Yep.
Where they don't have to go out anymore. And so, man, it's just a whole different thing these days. That's again why you have like Danny Wimmer puts on these festivals here in the U.S. One of them is called Louder Than Life. Maybe you've heard of it. I think I want to say it's in Kentucky or something like that, or maybe the Blues Bourbon and Beyond or something is Kentucky, but he's putting on these gigantic festivals. 50, 60 bands. It harkens back to the old days.
Right.
And they're huge artists. And people come out to that. They come out to Lollapalooza. They come out to these things these days because it's, even though the ticket price is $300, they still do it. And maybe that's low. I don't even know, but
it might be these days.
Yeah. So you're almost constricted to those kinds of shows and those kinds of venues because you get all these huge acts to come in. You've got multiple stages, whatever it is, and then people just are there. They come. Right.
Yeah.
Rival Sons is one of my favorite bands.
Sure,
you probably know that. But they, as hard as they've worked and as much as they've done, I think that if Rival Sons, I think they were just in Grand Rapids, which is not too far from here. I'm not so sure how well they did. Another band is Kotzon's band, Winery Dogs.
Winery Dogs, yeah.
They just played in Grand Rapids, 2.5 sold out place, and the reason why is because, there's not 10 bands on the bill. They're not the greatest, most well-known band on earth. If you're a musician, I guess you know who they are, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just a much different thing these days. You know what I mean? It's a little more, like I say, complex and a little more. You really have to look at the whole touring thing and say to yourself, okay, is this really going to be worth it? Is it really going to be? Are we going to get audiences? And the other thing too nowadays, dude, is that it's really about selling merchandise.
Of course.
I look at music now as music is a vehicle to sell the merchandise. That's how you make money.
Sell your t-shirts. Yeah.
It's crazy. When back in the old days, it was a side thing, right? It was like, man, we'll play the gig, do this, make money, blah, 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 whatever it is, and sell a couple of shirts and some CDs.
Right.
Now it's like, how's the merch booth looking? Because, that's where it's going to be.
And the venue wants like this is the thing now. The venue wants a big cut now, right?
Sure.
In some cases.
In some cases, right.
Yeah.
I always try to avoid that if I can possibly do it, like scuttling out the side door before anybody knows before we're gone.
I've heard of recently I heard about there's like bars around the corner from the venue that are contacting bands and saying, hey, put your merch in here. We won't take any of it. Just send your crowd over here, you know?
I know. And that's actually a great plan on their part. Right? I was going to say ploy. Maybe it's a ploy as well.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
But that's not a bad idea.
This is what it's coming to for some people, at least, you know?
Yeah.
So what does that mean for Grinder Blues? I mean, you haven't had a chance to play El Dos, you know? I was in Europe when that record came out, which was kind of nice to have in the van to listen for a little while. It was a weird time though. Yeah. That was 2021 in the fall, and we were among the first bands to reappear over there after the lockdowns. Like we were walking into places and there was dust on everything. You know what I mean? We're like, you're the first band we've had in here. Literally,
the guys come out of the back room rubbing their eyes. What's going on?
Yeah, it was a little bit like that. So it's like it was just a really strange vibe and a strange atmosphere. There's like a lot of anxiety about it. People were anxious, like masks it was weird.
Yeah, of course it was weird.
So I got to listen to El Dos, but it was in the context of this just weird situation. So it was like at the time I couldn't fully embrace it the way I can now, which is why I say I listened to it. It's like, wow, this record is so much freaking fun, you know, and I hope you guys get a chance to go out and play it a little bit. Are you going to be able to do that?
I mean, I would love to, if we could string together, a month or something, that would be super fantastic. It's, the thing is we're with a European label, first of all, which makes it difficult to get a lot of traction in the U.S. unless they're really pushing it in the U.S., which they're not. The record has done much better in Europe. So it's possible that Europe will be the next possibility, for a tour. And I mean, like I say, we strung together 4 or 5 shows last fall on the West Coast, and that was fun. But, again, without constantly touring, it's a little bit hard to get traction. Sure. And so if you can't get traction, it just makes it harder to, move forward. So it's, dude, I don't know, man. I would love to. I think we all would. I know Doug would. And so we'll see what happens. I think there will probably be a new record before any huge
That was
tour.
My next question. Yeah.
Yeah. We've talked a little bit about it, trying to get it together. If it's a normal Grinder Blues plan, it'll be 5 years between records. So
and 5 days to record it, to write it and record it.
Exactly, man. No, I have made a conscious decision that this time around, I'm going to know when this thing's going down, and we're going to have some songs in the can ready to go before. So, nice. Who knows? The new record might sound a little bit different than this last one. I do think you're right. I think there's a lot of stuff on El Dos that was so, some of that stuff's the first time we played it that day.
Wow.
That we recorded. And so I like that. I mean, I think that's a really cool way to kind of get that spark, Sometimes what happens is, man, you're an artist, you play the same song 100 times. It doesn't quite have the same, it's a vastly different song than it was the first 10 times you played.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So sometimes when you can catch that first 10 times, one of those first 10 times, man, there's some real energy there, and it's a real interesting way to go. So it'll probably be somewhere in the middle. We'll probably have some tunes that are sort of ready to go. I have this, I have that. Doug's got stuff. Scott's a great songwriter, so he brings his stuff to it as well. And so we'll hash it together and say, okay, here's the, cool, man. Let's lay it down.
Right. I mean, you can do this, as you say, a lot of it you can do remotely. So you can do pre-prod on it. You can, if you can get Doug nailed down.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the thing too, is, man, Doug is the crazy thing. He's busier now than he's been in the last 30 years. He just all of a sudden, look, Grinder Blues has helped. KXM has helped. The Hendrix stuff has helped. Doug is doing a lot of things, and King's X is back.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's, he's very busy, and he's a lot harder to pin down than he used to be, over the last 7 or 8 years. So, and we're all busy doing other things. I'm producing bands and mixing records and doing that stuff as well. So it's a little bit difficult. Plus, I'm trying to get my own solo project out. I've got 3 songs that I've put out, but they're all going to wind up on a record here that hopefully before the end of the summer, and then I'll be working on that. So it's difficult to get everybody nailed down, but it can be done. And, it's really just like they said about the space program. It is the will to do so. It's really what
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. But I would love to get out there and do it. And it's a fun band to play in. That's for sure.
It was a fun band to see live.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate it. You saw one of the first, if that's the show I'm thinking of, it was here in Traverse City, right? The Streeter show.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you saw one of that may have been the very first Grinder Blues show, actually, if I'm not mistaken, because it seems like the record had just come out and we were getting ready to go to Europe. We left from there and went to Europe, in fact. So I think that might have been, if not the first, one of the first.
One of the first?
Yeah.
It didn't come off that way. I don't know how much rehearsal
That's because
you
we
did.
didn't rehearse.
This is the thing about seasoned pros. It's like seasoned pros can write a record in 5 days. Seasoned pros can record it and it sounds great and then walk out on a stage and play it and it looks seamless, which is and Scott was playing those copper drums, which were mesmerizing to me. I've never seen that before. Yeah,
those are DC, California. I'm not sure if those guys are even still in business, but I remember when he was getting that kit made. We used that kit on the last Bihlman Brothers record, which was What You Want, and it was and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think he's got a 26-inch kick on that. For the Grinder stuff, he's got a 26-inch kick. Yeah,
just huge, man.
Yeah,
like, it's such an interesting drum set. I've never seen that.
Yeah.
Copper snares I've seen, but shells, wow.
Yeah, heavy.
I asked him, I'm like, dude, how heavy are those things? Like, do you have a tech who's carrying that stuff for you?
Because I have 5 techs that carry all that. Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Like just how much gas it would take to wheel that kit around. It was like, we can't, it's cost prohibitive, man.
In hindsight, I think he probably would agree with you.
I always see guys on Instagram and they've got these massive drum kits, double kick, the whole thing, all the cymbals. And I'm like, that dude doesn't play out. I know he doesn't play out.
Totally. Yeah. Then you got Jack White or one of those dudes, where it's like, here's a snare, a kick, a hi-hat, and a crash. Go for it, man.
Dude, that is my favorite setup.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? It's anymore, right? As soon as you leave the house, that's your favorite setup. Absolutely, dude. I know. I mean, my amps, even whenever I'm doing shows that I can get to fairly easily, man, it's a grab and go.
Yeah.
Right. I've got these Avery amps that I'm playing. I've got a 30 watt 210, kind of like a tweed sort of sound, one channel that I use now for damn near everything. Yeah. Unless I'm going out for a long time, I'll take that with, but then I'll take my normal rig. But I really love it. It's grab, it's light. I go, it works. It sounds great. I'm in, man. It sounds great.
Well, the tech is becoming such that it's getting smaller, or if you need an amp at all anymore, it's like.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, dude. My wife and I went to go see Jeff Tate doing the Queensryche.
How was that?
Well, I'll tell you what, I saw it twice. We saw it once in Las Vegas at the House of Blues. Unbelievable. He just was doing Mindcrime. That was it. Amazing. And it was so good. And it was just amazing. We saw them again. I think it was in Grand Rapids, and it was right before the pandemic. There were no amps on stage, none.
There you go.
There was a drum kit and amps and panels in the back.
Okay.
That was it. So we had a keyboard player, 2 guitar players, bass player, him, and a drummer. And it just looked so wrong. You know what I'm saying?
Stacks.
I'm just
What's going on?
What is this shit? And I mean, it sounded great, but yeah, man, I mean, there are plenty of guys, especially the Nashville crowd, who are doing these fly-in dates from here and there and doing what? And they just grab their, what do you call it? Like
a Helix or something.
Yeah, Helix.
Yeah.
The Helix is making boards. They grab these Helix boards and plug right into the system and off they go, And to me, man, dude, then you got guys like Derek Trucks, who's got 7 amps and good for him. I mean, he can do that. But I'll tell you what, man, it looks cooler. It's just it sounds cooler. It's just, I don't know. It's this whole, but the kids, man, they don't mind that.
Tech is their thing, right?
Yeah. They don't mind that at all. They don't care about seeing amps or pushing air or anything. As long as it's coming through the speakers, they're good. I mean, they've been listening to stuff on headphones their whole life. You know, I mean, they don't know.
Or out of their phone speaker. They
these damn kids these days, they don't know what they're doing.
Hey, tell me about it. They didn't grow up in the days where you had a wall of Marshalls half of which didn't even have speakers.
Yeah, weren't even plugged in.
No, like, they didn't grow up on that stuff.
It's all about the show, baby.
No, not anymore. Not anymore.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
I was looking through some of I always creep the socials before I do this sort of thing, just to see what's out there.
Yeah.
And I saw some compelling stuff that I would like your commentary on.
Yeah.
I saw a picture of you with Betty White.
Yeah.
Tell me about
Wow, what an honor that.
Betty White.
Is that crazy? Yeah. So we did music for a movie called Love and Dancing, and Betty White was in it.
Yeah.
And that was at the premiere out in Hollywood, and she was there, man. And I was just like, it's funny with Betty White because she looks exactly like my grandmother.
No way.
They are twins. Now they're both gone now, but they looked so much alike. And so we used to watch when we lived in LA, we were going to MI. We would watch the Golden Girls all the time. It was like on all the time at our house,
okay,
at our apartment. So we were watching the Golden Girls, and that's when I became such a huge Betty White fan. I mean, I didn't know that much about her, but by that time, it was just such an honor to meet, just such an icon. And she was so nice and just such a sweetie. We had to get a picture with her. So
that's
yeah,
so
it was
awesome.
what a great honor that was, man.
And then I read somewhere that you played at the White House.
Well, I did not.
You didn't
play at the White House. No, that was a Sun Seals gig. And this is fun. Let's get back to the touring thing, okay? We get back to the touring thing, okay? So it was a Sun Seals gig. And so Sun, I don't know what they paid him. I'm not sure exactly how this whole thing worked. But for all I know, they may not have paid him anything. Because who knows how these gigs at the White House work? I don't know. Maybe they just think it's just such a great honor that you don't get paid. Or maybe he got paid big bucks. But anyway, he didn't need me on that gig. He's like, no. So, I don't need the other guitar player. I'll just play guitar on this one. So my brother got to go and play that one, and whoever, and I didn't get to go, man. So no, that is that one ain't on the resume.
That I think was on Wikipedia. We'll need to fix that.
Yes.
Oh, well, that's lame.
Yeah, it's a bummer. But when you're the side guy.
Yeah, I mean, it in some ways is an undignified life,
Indeed.
Yeah, you have to sort of take it as it comes and take it on the chin sometimes. I also saw that you opened for Great White not all that long ago.
Yeah, that was at a casino up in the UP. Great White and Foreigner all in the same week.
I saw that too, yeah.
Yeah, so that was fun. The Great White thing was it just popped up. I have a relationship with the casino, and they're like, my God, we got, Great White is coming. We got nobody to play the show. You want to play the show with them? I was like, yeah, sure. Sounds great. Went up and did it. Great crowd. Fun night. They didn't have Jack. What's his face was not the singer.
Jack Russell was not with them at that point.
Yeah. But the guy they had was really good, and it was a good show. It was fun. I was happy to do it. Yeah.
Their song House of Broken Love is one of my favorite songs ever, with some really tasty guitar playing in it.
Totally agree, man. Shame on me. I don't know what that guitar player's name is either, but he's a great guitar player. Really good bluesy rock guy that does a lot of cool stuff.
It's Mark. I always blank on his name too. I'm looking it up.
I didn't get a chance to talk to him because that was one of those shows where everything was moving so fast. We got done with our set, loading off the stage. My guys were loading off the stage. They were literally just pulling up to walk on stage and play. Okay. They weren't there. You know what I mean? And so we went off one side. They came on the other. And that was the end of that deal. So I didn't get a chance to talk to him. But he was running a Helix.
Oh, was he really?
Yep. He was running a Helix with like a 212 that I'm sure the casino provided for him. But he had a Helix. Yeah.
His name is Mark Kendall. And
Mark Kendall.
I always forget. But I just thought that was cool. Cool that it's weird where you pop up sometimes,
Yeah, totally, man. And then the Foreigner thing was interesting too, because that was what I like to call an officially licensed product of the Foreigner brand.
Oh, compelling. What does that mean?
There was not one original member of Foreigner in that band.
A great tribute band.
That's what it was. And they were great.
I bet they were.
God, they were so good. But I mean, they had I think Jeff Pilson was playing from Dokken. I think he was playing in that.
That's not bad.
No, and they had a couple of other notable guys from the 80s. I want to say Pilson. I think the bass player, too, was, I want to say it was Jack Blades.
That's not bad either.
Yeah, I think that's who it was, actually. So that was kind of cool. Got to chat with those guys. They were all a nice bunch as well. So, yeah, I mean, you know how it is, man. The opening gigs sometimes can be the best damn shows ever, and sometimes they can totally suck. It just depends.
For me, the few times that I've opened like bigger venues for bigger bands have been really great because I'm used to playing, dive bars and little clubs.
Right.
And, once in a while I get to play a festival where there's an audience, but usually it's a small room, small crowd. And then to be out in front of a real crowd on a real stage has always been kind of a treat for me.
Of course. It's a treat for everybody, man.
Yeah. I mean, so I kind of dig that, but, anyways, dude, what's cooking for you right now? You're doing the radio thing. You're writing some music. I've listened to the singles you've released. They've all been really great, really exciting.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
What else is cooking right now?
Well, I'm hoping to put a record out before the end of the summer, or at least get it done. And Metalville is interested in putting it out, so we might go that route. I may self-release it. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I'm working on that. I'm producing a few artists from Michigan and mixing some records for some other artists. So my studio is busy with that. So, and I'm playing some gigs around here and there when I can. What I want to do, thankfully, I would love to tour the Jabo record when it comes out. So hopefully that will happen. So maybe around the fall there might be a Jabo tour. I'll certainly keep you in mind and or keep you abreast of the situation. And then with Grinder Blues, man, let's hope. I mean, like I say, it could be a new record before a tour, and we'll just have to see. But
either or.
Yeah, and I'm still working the production angle any chance that I get, trying to do production music and keeping that going. And we just had a song. Well, actually, we just signed Worried Mind off the first record to one of our sub publishers. So that may show up. Yeah, that may show up in something.
Sweet.
One of these days. So yeah, staying busy. Like I always say, it's multiple streams of income, multiple streams of diversity. You got to be as diverse as you possibly can to scratch it out in this business. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So yeah, we'll see what happens. But my focus right now is really trying to get this solo record done and get that music out there. So we'll see what happens.
Well, when the time comes, anything we can do to help you promote that, I'm happy to do.
I appreciate that.
I also saw that you were in Toronto recently.
I was.
So if you find yourself driving to Toronto, driving past London, Ontario, hit me up.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's where I live.
Dude, yeah, we got to totally get together for a beverage, man.
Absolutely.
That would be great. I'd love to.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely.
Might get back out there. I like the Toronto. That was a cool, that's the first time I'd ever been there. And my wife and I just went up there for fun,
Well, hey.
Got to see the Hockey Hall of Fame, bro. I was like freaking out, man.
You touched the Stanley Cup.
I did. I'm
surprised you didn't burn your finger. It's like the Ark of the Covenant,
Yeah, right, man. Absolutely.
And I'm really sorry that, if you really want a hockey experience, you have to go to Montreal. That's where it is, man.
That's what I've heard. Even though the Habs suck this year. Oh, my God.
Yes, they do. And it hurts me. And the Leafs are good, which hurts me worse. So,
well, Montreal's my next step.
All right. Well, if you're driving past me, say hi. All right.
Right on.
Montreal's great. Thanks so much for doing this, man. It's a real treat for me to talk to you. And best of luck with all the stuff. And again, I'm happy to help you if I can in some way.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you for the chat. It was great. I loved doing it, and it was fun. It's great to get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, you too, man. You too. And hopefully we'll talk again soon.
You got it, brother. I'll keep you posted on what's happening.
Please do. All right. Say goodbye, Jabo Bihlman.
All right, man. Thanks, dude. Really appreciate it. And take care, everybody.
Yep. Cheers. Burn the bridge so there's no way back. Burn the bridge so there's no way back. Burn the bridge so there's no way back. Burn the bridge. Huh.